Good evening, everyone, and welcome to day 14 of our Salesforce platform developer training. Tonight, we're going to continue with Visualforce pages, part 4. Okay, we're going to continue with Visualforce pages, part 4. So far, we've learned how to create Visualforce pages, and we've seen how we can put Visualforce pages in different areas of the org, from the home page to record page to the tab to different areas, pretty much in terms of action buttons. You can put a Visualforce component in terms of action buttons in a record page on the home page, and you can put it on the tab. Okay, so we also learned how to create controllers. So controllers are just basically what determines the actions that we can carry out when we are on a Visualforce page. Okay, so last week we learned about the standard controllers. We also learned about the custom controllers. We realized that standard controllers are defaults to the Visualforce page, meaning that you can use a standard controller without having to write any code. Then you can create, update, delete, and the likes using a standard controller. However, if you want to customize your code, if you want to be able to, make some changes to the standard controller functionality of any object, then you can create a controller, a custom controller. So a custom controller is essentially you just repeating what we have in a standard controller. However, you can do something different compared to what we have. For instance, you can redirect to a different page. You can check for a particular customer ID. You can upsert. But then again, all this stuff can be achieved with a standard controller. The only difference is that you have the ability to control the outcome of what you do with a custom controller. In addition to that, for a custom controller, you have what they call extensions, okay? So you have the opportunity or the privilege of just saying controller, okay, equals whatever controller you've created, or you have your standard controller and you extend the functionalities of the standard controller using an extensions, okay? So extension is essentially you extending. So now, sometimes you might be asked, or you might want to have different controllers, not just one controller like this. You might want to have controller 1 and controller 2. So now the question is this: if you have two controllers like this, that means you're extending the functionalities of what is inside controller 2 and controller 1. However, the leftmost controller will take precedence, okay? So if you have, let's say, in a particular controller, you have this action called delete customer, and it is doing something. And in another controller, controller 2, you have another delete customer. Maybe delete customer is doing something differently in controller 1, then in controller 2, the delete customer is doing something differently. What would happen is, according to Visualforce page, this would take precedence. This would be the final delete customer action that will be called, okay? So if delete customer is here, this delete customer will override what this delete customer is and the like. So the leftmost would always override the further right controllers, okay? So remember, you can extend the functionality of a standard controller. So now let's go into continuation of what we learned last week. Create customer. We previewed this create customer, and this was where we stopped, right? We can create, hopefully this should still be working. Okay, create. Yeah, we're able to create, and we were able to review what we created, okay? And we're also able to delete what we created. So we've pretty much created a CRUD. However, we also need to create the CRUD for invoice an invoice item. So I'm going to just put, I'm going to focus on just creating an invoice. Then we link the invoice. Okay. So right now, this is what we have. What if instead of, obviously, we don't want to edit, we want to, because we know that if we want to edit, all we need to do is just go to the customers and click on edit, right? Because of the URL, we know that we can edit, which is fine. But what I want us to do is we need to list all the invoices of this customer on the left-hand side or right-hand side. Let's actually move this to the right-hand side and bring this to the left-hand side. To do that, I'll go to customer details. This is customer details, okay? And this is the row. The row is what determines the overall container, okay? The customer detail is the form, right? This is the form, okay? And this form, this custom column is this left-hand side, okay? And this one is this right-hand side, okay? So what we can just do is collapse this and move it up, okay? Make sure you move it up here, and we're pretty much done. Okay, refresh this. You've moved this to this. As you can see, there's some space here that we can adjust properly. So what I can do is, you can just kind of like maybe put some space here if you want to, or let me see. So this is row MD, and this is center. You can wrap it around. You can just put a style here, right? You can put a style here. Let's say margin left, 20 pixel. Okay, so we can just kind of like create a left margin. Okay, as you can see, it's moving a little bit to the right. That wasn't enough. I can just make it 50, so I can see a bit of space. Okay. Yeah, so that's about it, right? So I've moved this from the right-hand side to the left-hand side by just moving things around. So now what we want to do is we want to display the invoices here. But before we can do that, why not let us create, update, and delete invoice? Then we now move things around on the customer page for that invoice. So let's create a CRUD for the invoice. How do we create a CRUD for the invoice? First thing, let's create a controller for the invoice. So now if you're given an object, okay, just 1 minute. Okay, if you're given an object, this is how you should create a CRUD for that object. Let's assume you've created the objects in the Salesforce. You go to new, Apex class, invoice controller. Okay, and I will just literally copy everything here. I'll copy everything here and just paste it here. That's it. You've created. You just need to make sure that wherever you have customer, you have invoice. So you've created, this is what I call repetition of code, however, for a different use case. So there's no way you will go wrong with this starting point. You just change the name from customer controller to invoice controller. And the next thing is you want to just change everything to invoice. Okay, change everything to invoice. And you've created another invoice, another CRUD. Okay, invoice ID. Okay, so we have invoice ID action type, which is fine. So now going here, what do we want? We want invoice ID instead of customer ID. Okay, then coming here, we want invoice ID. Okay, so coming here, we want invoice instead of customer. We want invoice record. Okay, then we want invoice instead of customer. but it has to be an invoice instance. Okay. Then we want invoices instead of customer. Okay. But we're going to readjust the query shortly. We want invoice upsat instead of customer. We want invoice.id instead of customer. We want the invoice ID instead of customer. Don't worry about this. Actually, we can just quickly do that. And we want the invoice instead of customer. Okay, so we have created pretty much the invoice. The only difference is we have to be using the invoice query. Okay, so now I go to invoice and I type in the query to get all the invoices. Okay, so what do we have in invoice? Go to my setup and I'll go to objects. Okay, and I will go to I'll go to invoice, so I can see the fields in my invoice. Okay, so I know I have customer, I have due date, I have name, I have start date, and I have total invoice amount. Okay, so what I can do is just query them. Developer. Okay. Start date. Total invoice amount. Customer. Okay. Remember, customer is a master detail relationship. What does that mean? It means that I can get not just customer, but I can get all the properties of a customer. So what do I mean by that? I can get everything inside the customer object. So if I go to customer, here, because of a master detail relationship, I can get everything here, everything that has to do with customer from the invoice. Okay, so let me show you how you do that. So the customer would turn this one to relationship because it is a master detail relationship. Okay, then you get name, you get last name, and you get email. Okay, so as you can see, we've been able to retrieve more than just the invoice. Similarly, I go to this one and I just copy and paste it. Okay, at the end of the day, invoice would always have those fields. Okay, change this to invoice. Okay, so now I've literally replaced customer with invoice. The only thing that is I need to fix all this error. Let's start with 19. Unexpected token select. What does that mean? It means that it is not expecting select and it's saying select. So I'm going to take one of the select off. Okay. Going to the next one, unexpected token select. I'm taking the next off. Okay. So variable customer ID does not exist, which is this. So I have to make sure it's invoice ID. This should be invoice, okay, instead of customer. Okay, can you see the way I just literally turn the working version of my code and I built upon that working version to create a new stuff, right? That's how you will be coding when you are confident about the things you've done before. It becomes easier to code. It becomes easier to write code because you've written it before. There is no new thing. As you can see, I've changed everything from customer to invoice. Okay, let me put a pause here and answer one or two questions because I can see one hand raised. So I'm going to ask Amos, do you have any comment, any question? Going to mute yourself and speak.
Yes, I do. So I want to be sure. Can you hear me, please?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Yeah, good evening, Batope. So I want to ask, from what you wrote here, you said if an invoice is not null, so invoice should update, and if it's not, else you should create the invoice. Then you now continue this invoice. So what's the effect of this last other one? This invoice
This is
below
invoices.
after create.
This is invoices.
Okay.
This is different from invoice. Invoice is one. Invoices is many.
Okay, that's like a list.
Yes, this is just to retrieve all the invoices in the system.
Okay, so what about the this invoice record? I thought this invoice record is also a list too.
This invoice record is dependent on this.
Okay.
So if we're not into this space, we're not going to have a list of invoices. And we need this list of invoices for our list of invoices. If you look at, we have for view all accounts, right? List of account. That's what we're trying to create these invoices for. List of all invoices in the system. Okay. We'll eventually see how it's going to come in, but that's the objective for that query, to get all the list of invoices in the system. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
No worries. Okay. Ola, please unmute yourself and speak.
Could you please explain the meaning of this? Like
this is just an instance.
Exactly.
It's just an instance. So look at, just similar to JavaScript, right? Is an instance that shows that this thing I'm trying to manipulate is this. So you can, let's say you have invoice record, right? This invoice record somewhere else could have been altered. So I'm trying to pass in the current value, or what I will call the default value, in this scope. This is a scope, right? Because everything collapsed, the scope is gone. If you collapse this invoice is gone. So when you're constructing, you're saying this, meaning that on initialization, on loading of this page, this is the value of invoice record. Meaning that when this page loads, invoice record is this. That's what it means. This dot invoice record, meaning that at the instance of page load, which is this scope, when the page loads, you're in the first controller, which is a controller that comes with the class. Then the invoices is this. In future, these invoices can change, maybe if you have a very large code. However, at this scope, in this scope area of interest, this invoices is this. So you're literally saying, this is what I want invoices to be at that scope, because it can change. Okay. So that's what it means. A programming term. It's not really like something I made up of. It's a programming term, and it's not something you should be bothered about right now. However, if you want to go into core programming, these are the things you would expect to know. Okay. But for your learning sake, don't get overwhelmed by that concept. The most important thing is, can you select and retrieve data from the system? Can you assign those data into a variable? Can you display those data in a visual representation of those data? Okay. Can you destructure the data? Those are the kind of things you should focus on right now. However, if you want to advance your programming, then you need to understand the concept of this. You need to understand the concepts of overloading of method, interface, extension, all those kind of things you need to know. But you need to get on the job before you can start, learning deeper stuff. For now, we want to get you on the job so you can have more interest into coding. And if I start teaching you the fundamentals, then you can easily get lost with those concepts. Okay, so let's continue. Now we've created an invoice controller. So what do we want to do? First of all, how about we list all invoices? How about we list all invoices? So in order to list all invoices, we could just copy list all. We could copy list all customers and just replace it with list all invoices, right? So I go to Visualforce page, list all invoices. Okay. The only difference, remember, the only difference is you want to change all those customers related variables and stuff to the invoice that you've just created. Okay. So first thing first, let's go to delete customer and call it. Let's go back to our controller because it's very important to use the right control, the right stuff. Create customer will now be create invoice, right? Delete customer will now be delete invoice. We're still going to change the URL, okay? Don't worry about that. Let's focus on the things that we're seeing and we're changing over time, okay? Delete invoice. So instead of customer, we call it invoice. Instead of customer controller, we call it invoice controller, okay? Okay, so let me save this. Okay, so we have this, just call it invoice form, invoices, list of invoices. Okay, invoice. So we have that, save. Invoice controller is save. Why is my stuff not saving? So it's saving. Okay, I'm just waiting for it because you can tell if something is saving by just looking at this stuff, right? The asterisk to tell if it's saving or not. Would you like to close without saving? No. Okay, I don't know why it's not saving. I'm just going to close. Yes, open again. Pages. Okay, apparently I think it's saved. Okay, did not save. List, invoice opening form. Just put it there, doesn't matter. List of all invoices. Okay, so what do we want to display in invoice? What do we have again? Going back to your invoice. What do you want to display? We want to display the name, the start date, due date, and the likes. Okay, so let's quickly do that. So I want to have the name. I want to have the start date. I want to have the due date. I want to have total invoice amount. Okay, so I've added one more element, right? Total invoice amount, okay? So now that I have that, I want to go here. So what do we want to show here? Not customers, but invoices, okay? We want to display invoices. And where can we find invoices? Remember, the invoices, okay? Is the invoices, okay? So now it's the invoices, and one invoice out of all the invoice you've been iterated, then you repeat that. The same concept of index, which we did here. to identify the column number or the this thing of the invoice. Then we say name, which is this. Then we go to start date. Okay. Then we go to due date. Then we go to total invoice amount. Okay, total invoice amount. Okay, so we have that. It's saying customer standard controller. That means we should have changed this to. So it's saying list of all invoices is referencing customer, but is meant to be standard. So unknown property customer standard controller dot invoices. So what that means is that we need to change this to invoice because we're using the standard invoice feature, not customer. Okay, unknown property invoice standard controller dot invoices. So it's telling us that it doesn't know what invoices is. So we change this to invoices. Okay, invoice controller. Okay. So what again? Apex invoice controller, make sure that it is invoice controller. Okay. So it's now saying delete customer. So you go to invoice controller, delete invoice. Okay. What else? Invoice standard controller dot customer. So you go to invoice and use invoice. Okay. Invoice. Okay. Instead of customer ID, you change it to invoice ID. Okay, but obviously we're still going to create an invoice detail page. But for now, let's just have a working code. Okay. So now invoice standard controller dot customer. Are we using customer anywhere else? Okay, this is where we're using customer. Change it to invoice. Okay, you can debug the error based on what you're getting. It becomes intuitive the moment you start playing. Just keep playing, and you'll be able to debug all this stuff. Okay, so now we have this. Let's create an invoice. Okay, we need to create an invoice. What do we need to do? Create an invoice. So how do we start? Go back to your create customer page and just copy everything you have here and Visualforce page, create invoice. Okay. Now you can just paste everything in there. So now you've pasted it here. You can just change this. Okay. What you want to change is you want to change the reference of customer to invoice. Okay. That's all we're trying to do. Change reference of customer to invoice. But make sure that you know exactly what you're doing. Okay. Because it's not everything you're going to change. It's not everything that will be applicable to invoice, but you can start changing. Okay. So now we have that. What else do we want to have? Delete customer. We're probably not going to need this in creation of invoice. So let's take it off. So now we've done that. Going down here, invoice creation form. Okay. Then invoice details. Okay. So now that we have that, the first thing we want is the invoice name. Okay. So we have the invoice name instead of customer. If you go to invoice controller, where's invoice controller? Instead of customer, what do we have? We have invoice. Okay. Invoice. Then we know that invoice exists. Okay, so we have that. Then it's going to give us a bunch of errors, which we have to address one after the other. When you're creating invoice, you have customer. Okay, so we need to do a lookup to customer. How do we do that? We select customer. So what would be customer? It's going to be invoice, okay? Dots, go to invoice controller, invoice dot customer. That's what we want. We want to be able to select a customer, but we have to reference it using a lookup, and the lookup is just customer. Okay, so you need to make sure that you are putting the right field. Going back to create invoice, customer. Okay, then what else? We have due date. Okay, obviously you want to change all those error. Just what else do we have in invoice? We have start dates. Okay. Okay, so we created a logic that says you can either create an invoice or update an invoice based on if we have invoice ID present. Remember what I taught you the last time? You check if the invoice ID is not null. If it is not null, then you want to update because the invoice ID is present. If it is null, then you want to create a new invoice, okay? So the button that would appear will be based on the value of invoice ID. Okay, so let's change other areas where we have customers and we see what we've just done. So this is what we have, right? So invoice name, customer, invoice name, customer, start dates. So this is due date, okay? Due date, customer. Okay. Customer. And we need to format it properly, right? So if you look at this, this is 6, this is 6, this is 12. Let's make it 6. And this is 6, that's fine. But make sure that it is the same styling, okay? So let's see this. This is coming out, due date, start date, that's fine. What is this? After customer, invoice name, customer, due date. There's something there that we don't want, right? This is customer. What is this? Okay, the lookup. The lookup. Why does it have this stuff? It's meant to have like the icon stuff, right? How do we adjust that? Is an icon stuff. It's not meant to be like this. Okay, so let me see. Sorry. It's just a formatting stuff. Okay, so how do you? So this is an input field. Can you style it so that it doesn't have that? Let me take off this away for a minute and see how it comes up. Okay. You see, it's gone, right? It's gone. It's gone, but that's not how we want it to look. Let me see. Form control. Is there anything we can do to ignore that class? I'm thinking, okay, just give me 1 minute. I'm trying to think how to make sure that this stuff comes out nice. It's a form control, right? Form control, Visualforce page lookup. This is what I'm trying to create. So what if I wrap it around form group? Form group. Let me see form group. So I have this, okay? And I have this. What if I put it around form group? Form group is the same thing as form control. The only difference is that it's around a form group. If, okay, I'll just wrap it around a form group, okay? Let's see if that would make any difference. Otherwise, we're not going to spend much time on that. It's something that we can easily fix, but it's just that it will take a bit of research to find out how to override that, okay? So I'm wrapping it around form group. It's still not changing, right? It's still not changing. Okay, we have to continue, but we can go back to that later on, okay? We can go back to that later on. So now, sample invoice name, the customer that owns this invoice, okay? Start date, end date, create invoice, okay? So this is to create invoice, okay? So now let's go back to list of all invoice to see if our invoice is being displayed. Okay, as you can see, the invoice is now displaying, okay? Sample invoice, dates, although the date and time, this is kind of stuff you guys will spend time on, okay? You want to make it look nice. And how do you make it look nice? You make it look nice by formatting the output. For instance, you can transform. Remember, same in Apex, you can transform the output of a date and only retrieve the values you're interested in. You can also transform the output of a currency and only retrieve the values you're interested in. So let me show you what that means. Output tests, Visualforce page. Okay, output test Visualforce page. Can you see? Font style, that's fine. I want to, this is it. This is what I'm looking at. I'll copy this. Okay, I'll go to where's my list all invoice, which is this. Instead of me having that, how about me wrapping it around output tests? Let's see how we can format the start date using a more structured output test, okay? Remember, our goal is the start date. And the start dates, I put it here, okay? But I want the date to be formatted using this, okay? Can you see? it sort of changes, right? But that gives us the freedom to say we only want, look at this. This is the date. So I can just take off all this stuff, take it off, and just put a date, month, year. Okay. I'm not sure about taking that one off, but let's see. Okay. So it requires that save. Okay. And let's refresh this. Okay. So can you see it's now year compared to this? And that we're able to achieve by just transforming the output test from the normal expression to something more meaningful. Okay. So that's the way you can manipulate things. As long as you know what you're doing, you can transform the output test by passing a format into it. Okay. Just 1 minute. Due date is not a valid, it must be positive type. So is that not positive? Is that not? Okay, so I just kind of like remove the space. Anyways, the bottom line is we have a formatted date, but it can be better. Okay, remember, it can be better. So we've created list all invoices, and we've been able to also create a new invoice. We can try that again by just creating an invoice, give it another name, and the customer you select, although we can do better than that, but okay. And if you go to list all invoices, we have the list of all invoices. Okay, so we have create invoice, we can list invoice. So let's display invoice, and let's delete invoice. Let's display invoice, let's edit invoice, and let's delete invoice. Okay, so going by the same stuff, open, customer details, copy, new, Visualforce page, invoice details. Okay. Then you do the same thing. Okay, I just hope this stuff is very straightforward for you guys, because what we're just doing is we're building upon the things we already know. And we are creating new functionalities based on an existing code. So I'm not really doing anything technical right now. I'm just literally copying and pasting a working code. Okay. So I'm creating and I'm updating just a working code. Okay. So now instead of customer record, go back to invoice controller. What do we have? We have invoice record. Copy that and change it to invoice record. Okay, so we just change it to invoice record, but make sure that you are changing the fields. Okay, so you're changing the fields and you have everything you need. Customer. So you go up, invoice controller, customers. Where else are we using customers in the entire test? So invoice controller, customer, invoice. Okay. Are we using customer anywhere else? Invoice. Okay. This is details, right? I don't need all this stuff because I'm just gonna copy. I'm gonna copy my my invoice items, or you should be copying your invoice items here. Okay, you don't need all this stuff. Okay. So if I preview, what do I need? I need to view the invoice. And if I go to invoice details, okay, that is the invoice details. Sample invoice name. The owner of the invoice is Babatope, okay? So everything is just full name, and you want the owner to be here, okay? So we have this, okay? So you have the sample invoice name and you have this. And you can now start building other stuff. So what do I mean by that? All these stuffs are just static tests. This is the most important thing, grabbing the invoice. So let's quickly create a new invoice so I can show you that this stuff is actually getting the details of that invoice. I go to create invoice and I say, okay, invoice name is last test, okay? And the customer is Victor, okay? Create invoice. So if I go to invoice details, which is a page that is meant to go to last test, Victor, okay? The invoice is last test and is owned by Victor. So now you've seen how to view an invoice, okay? So remember, all you just need to do is change this one from customer details to invoice details. Okay, and you've been able to view an invoice. Whenever you create it, you will see it. Again, you can test. The customer is Babatope, due date, start date, create. Okay, test, Babatope, and the likes. Okay, so now we've created an invoice. We have listed all invoice. We need to edit an existing invoice. How do we edit an existing invoice? Go to customer details, make sure that you change this to, we have something like this here, delete customer. We can just turn it to delete invoice, okay? So where's delete customer? Customer details. Invoice details, okay? Invoice details. Invoice. And delete invoice, okay? Let's quickly try this and see if it works. Delete invoice. Again, I'm not doing anything technical. I'm only literally updating the previous code I've written and changing it for invoice, okay? Delete invoice. And we've deleted an invoice, okay? Even though you cannot see it, and that's because let's try again, okay? We have let me refresh this. It's meant to be delete invoice, okay? Let me see it again. This is delete invoice, right? And it's on. Oh, I was editing customer details. I'm supposed to be editing invoice details. Okay, so be careful whenever you're changing code. Make sure that you're changing the right code, okay? Go to invoice details. And I just changed it to invoice details, okay? Then I refresh this again. Invoice details. This is invoice details. Let's go back to the invoice. Let's create another invoice just to start. create invoice. Okay, create invoice. Invoice details page should have delete invoice. Let's see. Invoice details. Delete invoice. Okay, so save that, refresh this page, delete invoice. So let's see what happens when we delete. Okay, if you see that when you delete, it goes to invoice details, but the ID is gone. Okay, so if you view all invoices, you realize that the ID is gone. Let's link view all invoices to list all invoices so we don't have to go back and forth. I'll go to the home page, then view invoices. Oh, no, it's in our header template. Remember, header template is where we keep repeated items. Okay, header template, view all customers, list all customer. This one will now go to list all invoices. Okay, list all invoices, create customer, and this one will go to create invoice. Okay, create invoice. Okay, so refresh this again, then our link should be working. Create customer, create invoice, view all customer, view all invoices. Okay, so now let's delete this last one. Okay, go to view all invoices. It's still there. Okay, delete test, go to view all invoices. It's still there. So that means delete is still not working. So let's quickly debug delete. So go to invoice controller, delete invoice. What is delete invoice looking for? It's looking for invoice ID. Okay. If it is not null, it's going to look for that invoice in the system and it's going to delete it. And if it's successful, it's going to transfer us to delete confirmation. Okay. So now let's look for where are we when we're calling delete invoice? View all invoices. This is where we are. We are in list all invoices. Okay. So let's go to list all invoices. And let's go to the delete in the list all invoices. As you can see, the delete in the list all invoices is referencing customer details. So let us reference invoice details. Okay. Save. So now list all invoices will be referencing the invoice ID and the action delete. View all invoices, click on delete. Okay. It shows that we are in delete confirmation page. Okay. Go back to view all invoices. Let's delete this one. It shows that it has been deleted. Give it another name. Let's delete it. It shows that it has been deleted. Okay. So view all invoices. How about let's view. View will give you the sample invoice. So you can get all other fields from the sample invoice. Okay. View all other invoice. Okay. Then what about edit? This is edit, but edit is still going to this page. We need to just have a form that would edit the page. Okay. So how do you do the form? You go to create invoice and you just copy this form that you've written and you just put it in the page. For instance, you can just grab the Apex form. Okay. And go to, where are we when we click on edit? We are in invoice details. Go to invoice details. And this is where you want to put your form. Okay. You want to put it inside this place. Okay. So I can just copy all this So the form is meant to just come somewhere here. Okay, this is the form, okay? It gives us the invoice and we can update the invoice, okay? That's the edit. But obviously you need to look at the updates. Obviously you need to arrange it such that it's not breaking to the next line. Maybe you want to reduce the size of this, okay? Maybe you want to put it as 5, maybe. You want to put this as 6. Let's see this. Previously it was 7. Make it 6. Okay, it's reducing that. We're not really interested in that. Okay, take it off and put this as 5. Okay, refresh this. Okay, now it's here. So you might want to put this as, let's say, 7. Okay, then you probably want to put a margin, right? You want to put a margin. You can put style, margin left, 50 pixel. Okay, this is not the best way to write your style. Your style sheet should be present in the style file, okay? It's just that because I know what I'm doing, I can easily manipulate things, okay? So now you've seen how to edit, you've seen how to update. Now we've created a simple CRUD for invoice. So now, when we view customer, I want to be able to put the invoice here for that customer. Okay, so I want to put, instead of me having this form here, I'll just put all invoices for this customer. How do we do that? We go to, what page is this? Customer details. So let's go to customer details page. And this is our all invoices for customer. All invoices for customer. Okay, so I will okay, so this one, I will just take off everything from here, okay? I want to know when this one ends. Copy all this and take it off. Okay, invoice table here. Okay, so if I go back here, I refresh. So can you see invoices? So I need to take the button away. I don't need the button. I don't need the Apex form either. Okay, so I'm pretty much in charge of that box. Okay, then what do I need? I need to put a table here that shows me all the invoices of the customer. So let's go to list of all invoices. Okay, table, div, sorry. Okay, and I grab the div and I go to customer details and I just paste it here, okay? Now it's going to get an error because it's going to ask me, I don't have invoices, but I'm not going to be using invoices. I need to have the invoice of that customer. So invoice, select, this will give you all the invoices based on the invoice ID. This will give you all the invoices in the system. So how do you find a particular invoice for the customer? So you probably want to have a clause in your query. And the clause in your query would say, okay, where this customer ID equals this. Okay, that's all we want to do. So in your invoice controller, where can you put that query? Considering that this is invoices, it gives you all the invoices. Where would you put the query for the invoice of a particular customer? So I want at least one person to raise their hand and let's discuss that. This is a very simple stuff, but I want you to kind of like tell me where you should put that query that will give you the invoice for a particular customer. And where will be the clause? So anyone willing to tell us that? So basically, we want to find an invoice for a particular customer, given the customer ID. We know from our query that if I want to find select ID from invoice where customer okay, so this is the customer ID. Okay, so if you have more customers with a lot of invoices, this is strange. How come all our customers don't have more than one invoice? Okay, what we can do is create an invoice, okay? So Butterfly would have at least more than one invoices, right? So this is Butterfly's ID. Wait, customer, I missed one A. Okay, so we have two IDs. So now the question is, based on this information, how would you create a customer? This is, you go to the customer and you see all the invoices of that customer. How would you do that? If you guys don't talk, I'll just make it an assignment. So please, I want to see your approach. Amos, are you raising your hand up, or is just old hand that is raised up? So can someone just show me or tell me how? I've given you the idea. I've given you what it's needed. I just want someone to just volunteer and talk, because I cannot just be showing you all the solution, right? Even if you want to put it in the chat, you can put it in the chat. But I don't want to make. I can just make it an assignment for you guys, but I want communication. I don't want to show you all this solution. I want you guys to do something. Okay. Okay. In the customer details, yes. What happens in the customer details? You go to the customer details. What do you do in the customer details? What do you have in the customer details? So let's go to the customer details. This is customer detail. Okay. So if you look at customer detail, if you look at the customer detail, did we update something? Shouldn't be updating. Oh, we're updating, and you guys did not tell me. We're updating customer detail. Oh no, yeah, we should be updating customer detail. We should be updating customer detail. What I want is customer controller. Okay? In the customer controller, this is a customer. Okay? What can you observe from the customer? You have this. But I've given you this, right? Which is you querying the invoice. What if you turn it the other way around? Select ID from customer Okay? But can you not do something like this? Select ID from invoice. Meaning that I am not only selecting, okay? I am not only selecting, okay, let's look for the relationship. If I have to show you everything, you guys will not be learning, but it's not going to be fair. You have to learn, you have to be able to solve problems, okay? So if I go to invoice, I want to see how invoice is related to customer. I know they are related, but I want to see how it is related. Remember what I told you when we were doing SOQL? The SOQL, this is a relationship, right? You go to that relationship, then invoices. That's the child relationship name. Invoices. So I can easily say invoices underscore har, which will give me all the customers and the invoices in the customers. Okay, you add S to it, underscore har, which shows relationship. This is a key thing there. So anytime you want to display the relationship details of an object while you are in a different object, just do the subquery. Do the subquery. We can do this because this is the parents and this is the child. But remember, how do you know what to type? You don't need to cram this. Go to your schema. Go to your schema, go to the relationship, and click on that relationship, master detail. Click on it. And once you click on it, you will see the child relationship. Okay? I don't want to be showing you all this stuff because this is what differentiates a good student from an average student, from an exceptional student, and the likes. But then again, these are things you'll be expected to know in the workplace. Okay? So now we have that. Let's go back to our code. It means that I can add more query to this. Okay? Instead of from customer, I put comma. Then I can grab all my invoices. Due date, start date. Okay. What else is there? Total invoice amount. From invoices underscore R. That's it. So we've been able to retrieve more information just by adding an extra query here. So when we go to the front end, how do we display that? Because remember, we want to display those values in our table. Okay? So how do we display that? Remember, it is no longer invoices. It is what? It is what? It is, go back to your consumer, I said consumer. Go back to your controller, customer. It is customer. It is not invoices, but it is customer. So customer gives you a list. Go to, this is customer. Okay? Customer give you a list. Then what do you want to do? You want to iterate not just the customer, but one of the list, the record for invoice. You want to iterate it. So how do you get it? You go to invoice, because the invoices is what you are trying to get. The invoices, that's what you're trying to get. So I've gotten that invoices, which is bunch of invoices for one customer record. Bunch of invoices for one customer record. Then what do? Invoice, repeat, that's it. So now you need to expected test, blah, blah, blah. So what you want to do is just clean up this stuff, okay? So you want, first of all, let's kind of like clean up this stuff. Let's find out where the issue is coming from. For us to find out where the issue is coming from, we need to clean up this, okay? Expected test, incorrect parameter type for subscript, expected test, received number. So it's saying that we need to have it's saying that we need to have test instead of number. So it's saying that it's expecting a test instead of number. So what that means is that it's not meant to be 0. It's meant to be like you're iterating something and you're putting in the value of what you're iterating in there. Okay, so let me return this so we don't break the code. I expect this to work. Okay. Let's grab the first element of customer, which is this. So customer, we need to let me see. Just give me 1 minute. We need to reduce if we are taking this, it's taking the first element. Let's do this. Okay. So the reason why we are not using a list is because we've already limited the response to 1. So it's going to just have one customer with a bunch of invoices. Okay. Compared to when you don't limit it to 1, then you have to put a list in front of customer declaration, right? You need to put a list in front of customer declaration, and it will change the data structure of this customer. Okay. So going back to our customer details page, let's now preview this page. Okay. So we have this. So does that mean this guy doesn't have any invoices? That's fine. Let's go to a customer that has invoices. Okay. We know that Babatope has invoices, at least 2 invoices. Okay. Let's change this to Babatope's ID. So it says SO object row was retrieved without querying. So we need to query this for us to be able to use it. Okay. We go to, and we just need to add name, okay, to our query list. Otherwise, we will not be able to use invoice name in our page. Okay. So this is how you display the invoices of a particular customer. So as you can see, this is a customer view, but this is the invoices that belong to this customer. If I create another invoice for Babatope right now, okay, and I go to view all invoices, which is this, is there, but I go to Babatope's view, it's going to show the invoice I just created for Babatope. Okay, this is how you create a simple relationship using Visualforce page. Okay, as you can see, it looks easier, but you need to spend some time doing this. Now, we've been working based on preview of our Visualforce page. which is obviously internal. How would you give this to a customer or a business if you have to do this in an enterprise or at work? You cannot just be saying, this is the link, You cannot just be saying, this is the link to the page. Doesn't make sense, right? So before we continue, I would like to find out if you guys have any questions. Okay, let's stop here and find out if you have any questions based on what we've done so far. Because right now I'm no longer going to be coding, but to show you one or two things on how you can present your Visualforce page. Okay, Amos, please unmute yourself and speak.
Yeah, but please, I wanted to ask, because I worked on the last class we had, and I noticed that there are some changes with the code I'm seeing. Like the initial one we used, if you can go to the table, I want to know if the table you got it from the Bootstrap, because we didn't have the last time we didn't use the list of all when we just did that small coding. The CRUD we used the other time when we created just for customer. We didn't use the list.
So are you saying we did not use list of table?
We didn't use the list of table that particular day. Just what we did was just we created, we deleted. Yeah, we created and deleted. Yeah.
I believe we used list of table because I haven't touched the code since the last time. This was what we did. We used table. In the last time, and I think I copied it from Bootstrap or something like that. I think what did I copy? Let me see. This was what I copied, right? I just went to my view page source and I copied the table. So this was what I copied. I could remember. I copied everything from here. Then I just remove all those duplicates. I just turn it into one. So what I did was I did something like this. Copy, go to this. Okay, I'll just put it here. Paste. Refresh, this is it, okay? Then I just cut all those repeated elements and I left just one of the elements so I can work with that element because everything is just.
So what about the other parts? What about the other parts, the below part where you had the view, edit, and delete? Because
I just created my own output link. I created my own output link. As you can see, there's an output link which is an additional TD. Okay, so these are extra stuff I created. So if I copy this, I can just put it in my extra TD, and it's going to be an action element.
Okay, so if I understand clearly, the var and the index is just like an iteration, like saying a repetition. Okay, after this, go to the next one.
Yes. Okay. So this is just for you to iterate. Okay. So this is for you to be able to number. As you can see, we have 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106. Okay. So I use index. Index is now a number. Then after the first iteration, I increase the value of index.
Index by +1.
Then the next iteration will now have 11002 and the likes. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, no worries. So is that all the questions before we move to something a little bit different, but still very useful for your learning? Okay, let's go to how to display our page. For you to display your page, you need to have a site. So this is the beginning of what we're going to be learning tomorrow, okay? I probably wouldn't show this tomorrow because it's part of what you need to know. In Salesforce, if you're in Developer Edition, then you can create a dummy site, check the availability of the site, then register that site. If you're in production, it's a different ballgame. You have to register officially and you have that domain. Okay. So now that you have your site, registered. Site is just a way you can relate to the public. Everything we've been doing so far is internal to our hub. However, if you register a site, you can now create a new site. So, customer app. Okay, now, would you like to make the site active? Meaning that once the site is saved, the site will become active and people will be able to see your site. Yes, I want to make it active. What would be your site homepage? Remember, our site homepage is this homepage. Okay? So it's asking, what would be your site homepage? This is our site homepage. I go to sites. I look for that page. In my Visualforce, I select it. Then Salesforce automatically gives you other pages like in maintenance, site templates, and the likes, meaning that if you want to bring your site down or you want to work on your site and you don't want it to be affected by other people, then you can put in maintenance, okay? Then you can look into all this, but more importantly, this is just you making sure that your site is secured and protected, okay? I click on save and the site will be created and activated, okay? So you can see the site has been activated. If you click on this, you will be able to see the site. So now you can give people this website instead of your developer console websites, okay? Not just that, there is more to this. The first thing is you go to the site that you just created, okay? And you can go to public access settings. This is very important. You know, everything you do right now, you've done it because you're an admin and you have access. Remember your role and permission. Everything boils down to who you're giving access to. When you create a site, a custom profile is created. And the app name, the site name that you gave would be the custom profile name. Okay? So what is a custom profile? A custom profile is a profile that is created to enable access. Anytime you create a new site, you create a guest user. You create a guest user. And a guest user should be able to access your site. A guest user is someone that do not have access, login access to Salesforce. Okay? So if I go to incognito, I should be able to access this site. I go to create customer, but it says authorization required, meaning that as a guest user, I cannot create an invoice. I cannot create invoice. I cannot create customer. I cannot view. I cannot do anything pretty much. This is where your knowledge of Salesforce comes in and you start granting access to the guest user profile for the application you just created. Okay? Can you see the way I navigated to the customer app profile? I go to the object I created. Okay? Remember, all the custom objects you created, you can grant them access. Okay? You save. And you can do all other things you want to do. For instance, you can now say, okay, I have given this guy access. Let's try to refresh this and see if it's going to work. Okay, refresh, create customer, doesn't work. Create invoice, still doesn't work, despite having access. The next thing you need to do, go to sharing settings. Sharing settings will check the access for your custom objects. So what do I mean? You go to edit, there is internal access and there is external access. Internal access is the team within Salesforce that has login access, okay? External access is the people that you want to give access to. So you go to all your custom objects and you give access to your custom objects, okay? So when you create access, it's kind of like it takes time, okay? It takes time and it will create sharing, okay? So let's wait for this to load. Okay, so I think it has loaded. Let's go back to this is how you open up access, okay? You will do it gradually until you eventually get there. Create customer, still doesn't have access. Create invoice, still doesn't have access. So what can you observe? You can observe that whenever you click on create, it is trying to access an Apex page. And it's trying to access an Apex page called create customer. But it cannot grant access to that page. So we go back to that profile again and grant access to the Apex. Public access settings, go to enable Apex and edit, okay? And all the Apex you've created, you want to add it, okay? All the Apex that is required to make the application work. Make sure you grant access to that Apex, okay? Typically, I would just kind of like, grant all the access that I don't know which Apex I'm using, but I just grant the access. But ideally, you should only grant access to the Apex and Visualforce pages required for your application to work, okay? So now let's go to invoice details, account details, create customer, create invoice, customer details, invoice details. Okay, I'm just looking for all the things that I used in my, again, you can just copy everything as long as you know what you're doing, but don't do that, okay? You have to only grant least required access, okay? So again, let's test our application. Create invoice. We can now see the invoice. Remember, we are in incognito mode, okay? That means we can see the create customer. Create invoice is also working. View all customers is working. And view all invoices is working, okay? So you've seen that everything is now working because we have granted the privilege, the access, okay? And it has to do with our profile, sharing settings, and Apex and Visualforce page. That is the Visualforce page for you. There is more to Visualforce page. There is more, but this is the basic. This is what you need to know to get you started. We've been able to create a very simple application that can create, read, update, and delete. We've also created an application that can retrieve data from a related item. We've been able to create a styled application, meaning that our application looks good on a desktop. And because we're using Bootstrap, our application also looked a little bit good on mobile. Maybe not the best, but looks good on mobile as well. In addition to that, we've been able to publish this application using sites. And we've been able to set the settings of this site such that anyone can gain access to the application. There are more things you can do, but then again, it's totally up to you. For instance, if you're using Flow, then you can grant the Flow access. If you're using anything on the Visualforce page, you need to grant the access. This is the customer app profile, which is used by the guest user, okay? So anytime you feel like something is not working, make sure you go to the profile and grant that access for the customer, which is the guest user. In addition to that, you might want to have the site standard pages, which is this, included in your Visualforce page. What does that mean? If you go to this page, and if this page does not exist, you don't want this kind of stuff to appear. You want to design your page. How do you do that? You go to the standard site pages, and you will include all this in the page. And not just that, you go to your Visualforce page, open up, and go to your site page, go to all these pages, okay? And go to the one file not found, maybe page not found, unauthorized access. You can edit that Visualforce page. It comes by default when you create a new site, okay? So all the stuffs you can manipulate, all the stuff you can change. Whatever you see on this Visualforce page is just a template. You can use the examples we've done so far to change those templates and make it nicer, okay? So that is Visualforce pages for you. There is more to Visualforce pages. How do you get started? Remember, everything is on developer.salesforce.com. I wouldn't teach you everything. However, this is your go-to for learning Visualforce pages. I've only taught you how to move things around with Apex, with CSS, basic CRUD, standard controller extension. I cannot teach you. I have to teach you the things that will get you started at work. It's now your interest that will drive your learning. It's your interest that will make you a better developer. Right now, you guys are good to go. However, there's still one more thing that you guys need to know. Without that, you're not going to be very equipped, right? So I want to make sure that you're equipped for the workforce, and that's Lightning Web Component is the future of Salesforce development. I think it's going to be good for me to introduce you to it, and hopefully you can start working as a developer after the end of this month. Okay, please, like I said, book me for the one-on-one. Let me review all the things you've done throughout the entire training so I can release you to go apply for jobs. You don't have to meet with me one-on-one before you apply for a job, to be fair. However, your one-on-one with me is just an assessment of how I feel, or how I feel you're ready to go take on the challenge in the workforce. And remember, this is a starting point. It's not like the end of your developer's training. It should be the starting point, meaning that you should go and start digging deep. I learned everything I know today because I was curious about learning. And that's the way I was able to learn faster and grow these skills. Though I have a lot of experiences in development, it's not as much as Salesforce. However, because of my hands-on projects, I've been able to accelerate my learning. And this is what I would encourage you guys to do if you're interested in Salesforce development. You've learned everything that needs to be learned in terms of the basics and introduction. Then it's now up to you to go deeper to accelerate your learning, okay? So I'm going to stop here for tonight. I would like to find out if you guys have any questions regarding what we've learned so far. And if you guys want to maybe clarify one or two things, and you want to ask me one or two things, okay? So please raise your hand and I will call you one after the other if you have any questions. Okay? Any questions regarding what we've learned so far? Any questions? Okay. If there are no questions, then please, for us to meet one-on-one, I would prefer you have your project 1, your project 2, your project developer project 1, developer project 2, plus your CRUD. So you're reviewing with me 5 items, and we're going to be spending at least 2 hours together. Okay? So please do not book me if you're not ready. It's okay if we don't meet one-on-one. It's perfectly fine. But do not book me if you're not ready. Don't waste my time. I've spent a lot of my time for you guys. So please don't waste that time by booking me and not showing me anything. If you can spend a whole day watching all the videos, you'll be able to create not just the solution to what I'm asking you, you'll be able to create something better and you will learn so well. Okay? Again, I'm emphasizing it's okay not to have a one-on-one meeting with me. I wouldn't take any offense in it. It's okay if you are working and you don't want to go and pursue a developer's job right now. I wouldn't take any offense in it either. However, what I'm going to be upset at is if you book my time and you cannot show me a CRUD in Visualforce page, you cannot show me a flow with a student app I asked you to build, and if you cannot show me your project 1 and project 2, then we're going to have a fight. By fight, I mean I'll be really mad at you. So I don't want to be mad at you. I want you to have a good one-on-one session with me. So please prepare yourself for that session because it's more or less a sign-off showing that you're good to go. And I can even go ahead and give you something to work with, okay? The only way I can give you a job is if I can feel confident about your performance. I have people that are currently working with me right now. They are my students from previous cohorts. And I trust them. I don't even know what Emilia is doing, but I know that anytime they have a stand-up, she does well. And the business is happy. That's what I want to create. A place whereby you can have your full-time job if you want to, but by the side, you're still attending 2 other small businesses as a developer. But the only way we can achieve that is if you can show me that you are interested in becoming a developer, then I can trust you. I can go to bed and not worry that there will be a problem. Okay. So I think Amos has his hands raised. After Amos, 1 or 2 questions, then we leave for tonight. Amos, please.
Yeah, Dr. Thanks for the class today. First of all, the third assignment you gave us, we're still working on it with Anonymous, Anthony. We didn't really have a chance to finish it up so that at least most of us can check our code and see if maybe what we did is right. So I don't know if we're still going to have a tutorial class, like a practice session after this class. Because for 2 weeks, the last week was HRO and didn't really have any practice session after that, any extramural class after that.
So you haven't really finished that tutorial.
Yeah.
Are you guys
not done with it.
In that?
Where we stopped at the we're still on declarative. We're almost done with the declarative before the programmatic.
Okay. That's fine. One thing I will tell Tony and Samuel is to give you as many tutorials as possible. After, I think we have about 3 more days to go together. And for the next 2 weeks after the training, you guys are doing tutorials, learning everything all over again. Whatever you guys want, you guys will get it from the tutorials for the next 2 weeks. Okay? And it's up to you to decide to say, okay, this is for me or not. I mean, after tutorials, after training, after everything, you can tell if this is for you or not. It's not rocket science. It is something you have to tell yourself, am I ready for this? People are making money from this. People are making hell of money. But it's not just about money, it's about career. Do you want to be away from Canada and still be making the dollars? Because with your passport, I mean, some of them might not have it, but with your passport, you don't need to be in Canada. You can be in the States, you can be anywhere and still be making money. And you can still have a fulfilled life. You don't need to be waking up in the middle of the snowstorm and be thinking, is this all that is? So it's about a career change. Now you've been given everything. This might just be a starting point, but you've been given enough information for you to make an informed decision. Remember, you still have the BA videos. You still have the consulting videos. And you have developers video. It's in your heart. Okay? So I will tell Tony and Samuel to give you as many tutorials as possible from the moment we finish for another 2 weeks. Then the only thing that is I'm not available after that 2 weeks, right? So please try as much as possible to meet with me if you're really looking for a job, so we can just sign off the developers one-on-one session. Okay. Aside that, I think we're good, and I think based on what I've given you so far, you are also good. You just need to capitalize on it. Take advantage of it. Okay. All the best, guys. Take care, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye, everyone. Bye.